welcome to another edition of HARONA, and this evening I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Cherno Njie as my special guest on this edition of HARONA. Mr. Njie, thanks you for approving and accepting to be interviewed by us.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So, you know, HARONA editions, we start from childhood, so I'm not sure, am I taking you 50, 60 years back?
60 years.
60 years back.
Yes, I am.
So growing up in rural Gambia, well, before independence, I assume?
It is, yes. I was born in 57, so I'll be 62 this year.
This was before independence?
Yes, of course, before independence. I remember the old empire day before, and then the transition to independence after 1965.
Boy, oh boy, this country has evolved then for you. But let's start from then, 60 years ago, growing up in rural Gambia under Her Majesty.
Well, we had a picture of the Queen in my house, so we grew up with that. And remember Empire Day, celebrating Empire Day. I remember my early childhood. Somehow the national anthem changed from God Save the Queen to For the Gambia, our homeland. So that was interesting to observe in retrospect. It was a happy childhood, and grew up in Banjul, born in Banjul, of course, and went to school in Banjul my entire educational career before venturing in abroad to study in the U.S.
So Banjul then growing up, was it the Four Corners, was it cricket, was it rugby, was it football?
All of the above. We were what you might call free-range kids. You know, we moved around in groups, our own cohorts, our own friends. We had soccer, of course, football, and cricket. We played in the street. Everywhere was a playground for us. So we didn't have to worry about you know, safety or anything like that. It was a community in which everybody looked out for each other. You know, you could be playing half a mile from home, but you're still under the supervision of an adult who knew your parents and took care of you. So it was a happy childhood, very innocent one, looking back.
Well, many years ago, well, I've interviewed several people from Banjul. I find one element very fascinating. They said every house had what they call a port. So that means a house leads to a house to a house to a house. And you don't have to get out of your house to the street to go to the next house. So that means a lot of Banjulians said that was a safety net. So a lot of secrets were run by adults at night. If somebody didn't have food the next day, another adult would have gone, and the streets will not be aware of what had happened between one household head and the other. I mean, did you remember those days?
Yeah, we had something like that between our compound and the next compound in this case.
Yeah.
And looking back, I'm fascinated by the small space we have. Living in the U.S. now, when I come to visit, I visit my ancestral home in Banjul, and constantly fascinated how so many people
lived in so
maneuvered in a tiny space like this, each respecting each other, somehow managing with privacy issues and everything else. Well, the concept of privacy, of course, is different from an American as opposed to a Gambian in terms of how we relate to each other. So that's always been fascinating, and how you negotiate this small space, you know, with relatives, aunts and stepmoms, brothers, cousins. It's a huge number of people in a tiny space. And it tells you that in a community, what is important is social solidarity. If you have that, you can negotiate a lot of tough issues. And it's a learning point for me, just looking back, how we were able to navigate and be respectful of each other in such a tiny space. It's a metaphor for a lot of things that we can look forward to.
And education, you did Dara, I assume, and then you did you go to a Catholic school? Because a lot of people in Banjul had gone through a Catholic school.
Yes, I did Dara, of course. That was part of the ritual of growing up in Banjul. Attended Dara at Kent Street, which was a famous Dara there. And I wasn't a regular attendant. Sometimes I'll dodge Dara.
Yes.
So my record of Dara is rather spotty, but it was obligatory for us to do that. Early childhood education attended Albion Primary School, which was a mission school, really. And later on, Wesley School, also a mission school. And so that's early education as far as the Gambia is concerned.
And you did go to St. Augustine's Boys High School then?
Eventually, yes. My route to St. Augustine's was circuitous because I stopped at Crab Island. I had a stint at Crab Island and then went to St. Augustine's. After St. Augustine's GCE O-levels, I went on to Gambia High School A-levels and spent another 2 years there.
And going outside of the Gambia, did you go on a boat?
No, I flew out. And well, actually not directly after high school because I worked at Standard Bank for 3 years.
Okay.
So I took a detour after completing sixth form. I worked at Standard Bank for 3 years and decided to go to the US. I made up my mind then that I wanted to go to the US, and so scholarships for the US were not forthcoming for undergraduate degrees. So I had to work my way, really, to be able to get the funds and the savings necessary to be able to sponsor myself. So I did that and was able to eventually leave the job at the bank and move on to the US.
All right, and move on to the US. We'll take our first break here. When we come back, more with Cherno M. Njie. Stay with us.
South Africa Global is pleased to launch Dalaba Housing Estate. Dalaba Housing Estate is our newest estate located on the Sukuta Jabang Road. You can buy a finished 2 or 3 bedroom house or service plots accompanied with a free fence and gate. At Dalaba Housing Estate, you get to enjoy bituminized roads, gated and fenced properties, solar street lights, water reticulation, public amenities, 1,500 fruit trees aligned in streets and many more. Make a 25% down payment today and spread the balance conveniently for 10 years with GT Bank, EcoBank and Trust Bank. Terms and conditions apply. Wait, this is the best part. We are giving a discount on outright payments. For more information and exceptional service, please call our office line on +220 376 2333 or +220 776 2333. You can also visit our website on www.tafafricaglobal.com.
Welcome back to HARONA with my special guest, Cherno M. Njie. We talked about his childhood days in Banjul before independence and how he ended up working for Standard Chartered Bank before leaving for the United States. Mr. Njie, welcome to the second segment.
Thank you.
Upon arrival, where did you go? DC, New York?
Well, New York, and then flew to a rather remote part of Texas, Lubbock. I was admitted at Texas Tech University in West Texas. So it was quite a change from New York, the skyscrapers and the cosmopolitan nature of the city to a rather rural, comparatively rural area of Texas. So that's where I started for a year before moving on to another part of the state.
So you've always lived in Texas?
I've always lived in Texas. I've lived in Lubbock for a year or so and then moved on to Austin, which is the state capital, to attend the University of Texas at Austin, where I graduated.
So you've since lived in the United States?
I have. So since '83, I have continually lived in the United States, and looking back, that's a longer part of my life than I have lived in the Gambia.
In the Gambia.
So, yes, indeed.
First experiences living in Gambia. For the first time, I assume you've not been anywhere else before the U.S.
Well, Senegal, but Senegal is obviously not very
Comparatively
different.
the same at the time.
From the Gambia, yes. This was quite a sea change, I mean, literally going across the Atlantic. And my perception of Texas, obviously, was the cowboys and, you know, Dallas. The Dallas show was on at the time. So we all had a conception of what Texas was. So West Texas was a little bit different, very flat, and I was surprised of how cold it was. I thought it wouldn't be, but I went around wintertime and was surprised that I had snow on the ground. It was very, very cold, so that was quite a shock.
Moving to Austin, choice of study. What did you study?
Government. I graduated in government with honors, and then worked with the city of Austin, and then with the state of Texas, working in housing development. And that's why I worked for quite a while before moving on my own to start real estate development.
So real estate development is what you're doing now, and you've done for quite a while.
Yes, yes, for better part of, 20, 25 years. That's what I've done, both in the private sector as well as a state official, and work in the area of housing finance, basically affordable housing, and now doing both market rate housing as well as affordable, as well as venturing into other areas of investment unrelated to my core business.
Would it be correct to describe yourself as a businessman now?
Well, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as a real estate developer, all of these would be accurate. Yes, I do quite a lot of things.
Would I be correct to say you'll think about venturing into the same in Gambia?
Well, you know, there are opportunities certainly to look at in the Gambia because of the political climate, as you know, for the last 2 decades. I never entertained the idea that I could do anything meaningful in the Gambia with Yahya Jammeh in charge, because eventually you'll have to interact with him, and I'm not sure I can bend to his wishes, so it was never an option when he was around.
Never an option. Is it now an option?
Well, it is an option. I mean, certainly there are opportunities to explore, both in the housing sector, in agriculture. There is a huge potential, I think, untapped in agriculture. There are other areas, really, that one can look at, and so I'm open to looking at all options.
Would we be correct to say that you have experienced the American dream?
Well, everybody's version of the American dream, of course, is different. My version of the American dream is personal fulfillment, and in terms of getting my educational goals, making a life for myself and my family, being able to contribute to the American society in a meaningful way, and also being able to contribute to Gambian society. I mean, I had a good education here, good enough to go to one of the top schools, public schools in the US, and graduate with honors. So it's a tribute to the educational system we had then. You know, I was not by any means a superb, brilliant student. They were far more superior students than I had in my days in high school. But the opportunity was there, and we grabbed it, and it was good enough to put us on a path of succeeding in the US. And when I look back and see what is happening now, it's clearly we're not doing as well as we should have.
That means you had a great foundation
We had
as far
a
as
great
education was
foundation.
concerned.
Indeed.
And this was putting you in the right pedestal for success and prepared for the world, if you will.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we should hope that we have that same ladder for the current generation of Gambians.
We should hope that we have the same for the current generation of Gambians. We'll take a second break here. When we come back, we'll talk more about 2016 and politics of Gambia and New Gambia as far as Mr. Njie is concerned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to HARONA. My guest today is Mr. Cherno M. Njie. Mr. Njie, last segment we'll talk about politics. You're a successful businessman by all standards, as far as we can see. Why politics? Why do you have an interest in politics?
Well, I'm a citizen first, and whether you're interested in politics or not, politics is interested in you. I am affected directly or indirectly whether I actively participate in politics or not. That applies to me in the US as well as in the Gambia. If the economy doesn't do well, guess what? We will be called upon to help relatives, friends, loved ones in the Gambia. If the educational system doesn't work, jobs won't be available to folks living in the Gambia. That will impact us in terms of investment if we want to invest in this country. A good, qualified labor pool is essential to grow an economy. So I am implicated one way or the other, whether I choose to get involved or not. So for me, it's not an option. Politics is what we do, so we have to get involved.
Well, a lot of people would say you're comfortable, you're well-to-do. I mean, why would you malign yourself into risky ventures such as risking your life, your livelihood?
Well, I guess you're referring to the December 30th event.
Yes.
That is the culmination of a lot of years of observing what has been going on and trying to work with Gambians overseas and here to bring about change in a peaceful manner. It was a last-ditch attempt, really, after Njie made it abundantly clear, after 2 decades of brutal rule, that he was not going to leave. We had no option but to try to oust him through the use of force. And subsequent events, I think, vindicated our approach in that it took ECOMOG forces to force Njie out of the country. So we had no choice in the matter, in my view.
Did you approach political parties, politicians, civil society prior to December 30th?
No. In terms of talking about December 30th, no. There was no involvement in that. Like I said, there were various activities undertaken over the years to bring about a coalition. I remember the NAD, organized by other Gambians to help in forging unity among the various parties to give us a better chance of defeating Njie. That fell apart. And after the 2011 elections, it was really very desperate to see any ray of hope in terms of bringing the coalition together. It's been well documented, the factions within the coalition. So we felt this was an option that we had to undertake.
December 30th, a lot of people are of the view that you underestimated the entire team, underestimated Njie and his capabilities, and not enough preparation did take place.
Well, you can always say that in hindsight. Was the December 30th event better, less planned than Njie's own coup? I mean, coup d'etats are complicated matters, and this was a complicated military operation, and you cannot predict everything that's about to happen. You know, Njie felt threatened enough to leave the country. That's not an insignificant action on his part. So Al-Baji, who was then in charge, had to leave to go to Casamance. So they knew that there was a threat and they couldn't handle the threat credibly. They left. So I think in hindsight, we can look at it and say, well, it didn't succeed because of this and that. The factors that why it didn't succeed are complicated. And I get into some of that in the book.
Well, talking about the book, we'll talk about it in a minute. But how do you see today? Was there anything you could have done better? And what were your initial reactions after you knew it has failed ultimately?
Well, there are a lot of things we could have done better, again, in hindsight. But we acted based on the best available information we had at the time. And So I don't have any regrets about that. The information we had was good enough to act. Looking back, yes, we could have done certain things differently, but would it have mattered? Would it have changed the outcome? I don't know. Nobody can say that.
2016, how do you see it? The ultimate unity of parties did take place. Several parties came together against the one person, and of course GDC on the other part. What were your views 2016? I mean, from the arrest of UDP, lawyer Ousainou Darboe and the clique, to the killing of Solo Sandeng, to the on-the-spot count. It seems like politically, Jammeh himself just signed his death warrant in 2016 before December 1st.
Well, history, when you look at it, it's not a series of eventualities. It's a patchwork of things that happen. And you look at it in hindsight and try to say, to connect the dots. At the time this was happening, I was in prison, actually, in the U.S., and heard about the arrest of Solo Sandeng, of course, and his subsequent murder, and the fact that the coalition was able to come together and forge a strong alliance to defeat Jammeh. I was skeptical that that would happen. And so I was glad that they eventually was able to at least energize the people strong enough that they can come out and vote Jammeh out. As we know, he refused the elections, the outcome of the elections.
Talking about being in prison, were you aware prior to December 30th that you may bear certain responsibility as far as your U.S. citizenship and residency limitations were concerned if you go into a country, even though you see both countries as your home?
Well, not really. I mean, there may have been some indications of some legal jeopardy earlier on, in the aftermath of the failure. But my focus, really, our focus was, this was something we needed to do, and we were going to do it,
regardless of consequences.
Regardless of the consequences, we felt that the gains or the opportunity to essentially free a nation of 2 million people from the clutches of a madman was good enough, and for us that was all that mattered.
The ultimate sacrifice wouldn't matter.
No. I mean, we all paid the price. I mean, the folks who fell at State House paid the ultimate price. They're the real heroes, really, in this drama. And we paid some price, but hardly worth mentioning compared to what they did.
Fast forward, New Gambia is ultimately delivered. How do you see it so far, 2.5 years into a new dispensation? The change that you wanted, the change that you were willing to lay your life for, ultimately did happen. How do you see that?
Well, a much improved environment, obviously. The fact that we're able to have this conversation and cast aspersions on the government is itself a testimony to the fact that we have a different dispensation now in the Gambia. But there are some significant challenges that we've seen. I was here in 2017, just after this new government came into being, and I gave an interview in which I lamented the concern we have that the coalition is not moving fast enough in terms of the institutional reforms that needed to be done to put this country on a different footing. And we see a lot of that foot dragging still going on. Of course, some reversals. It is apparent that Barrow is not moving fast enough in terms of these reforms. The fact that he has surrounded himself with Jammeh acolytes is very concerning. The fact that he's concentrated power so much, the fact that there is lack of transparencies, instances of apparent corruption, I mean, these are very, very worrying signs. So we're not out of the woods yet.
We're not out of the woods. Are you trying to still get us out of the woods by perhaps forming a political party and a movement that you may head, lead, or in fact be a strong part of?
Well, my focus is not just, is not primarily to form a party that I lead. Rather, it is to work in concert with other Gambians, to make efforts to put this country on a different footing. And that means obviously getting into the political fray. There is no way we can avoid that. The vehicle for getting political power is through party politics. And when I look at the landscape, I'm not satisfied with the incumbent government and the opposition parties in terms of what our expectations were and the deliverables they've done so far. So I'm in consultation with other Gambians about the need to create a credible alternative to what we have, to both the Barrow administration as well as the existing opposition parties. I don't think I'm satisfied that we have the right crew, basically.
Would I be correct to say you're thinking about a change, but you're no longer thinking about arms?
We're not at that stage anymore. But the political parties need to be formed, and we need to consult broadly. We need to build a grassroots movement to be able to show the Gambian people that there is an alternative. The political culture that Jammeh inculcated into this country, into the system, is still there. Barrow has not really had any notice. I'm not even sure he's aware of it, that the political culture needs to change, and that he is a catalyst for that his actions so far have done nothing but to basically entrench that same political culture.
Are you among the believers that Barrow is actually clueless?
Well, clueless in what sense? He knows what he's doing based on what his objectives are. His objectives are obviously to entrench himself, to get a second term. In that sense, he's not clueless. You know, if you build a Barrow youth movement, you encourage the politics of patronage, and you're dashing money left, right, and center. Contracts are being awarded without due process. You're bypassing the public procurement system. He's doing it to gin up political support for a run for a re-election. Seen in that light, he's not clueless. Well, he may be clueless in terms of what I believe should be the objectives of the government, but he's playing by a different set of rules, so we should not underestimate him.
We should not underestimate him. We're going to go now into your writings. I am sure there is a lot you want to say that you will not say in an interview. Hence the need for Sweat is Invisible in the Rain. You want to tell us a little bit about your memoir?
Well, it starts with my early childhood and goes on to my transition from the Gambia to the U.S. It gives an indication of the values I grew up with in a typical Gambian family in Banjul, and how that impacted my world outlook and my world view, and helped me succeed in the United States. It also takes a look at American society and my role in working and living there, and with this position of all of that in terms of how it affected my ability to look back to the Gambia and from a distance and see what I could do working with other Gambians to help change the country, put it on a better footing. And it is a tribute really to pay back or to give back to the society that gave us so much.
And when do we expect this to be out? I thought the name is really apt. Sweat is invincible, or invisible. Sweat is invisible in the rain.
Well, the title is based on a Wolof proverb, basically, in a Nyahadu Fenchi Tau. And I think it's an apt description of my life story. And so it'll be coming out in the fall, and I expect to do a book launch subsequent to that.
By way of last question, political parties, civil society, do you think Gambia and Gambians interested in the welfare of this country, as far as governance and rule of law is concerned, are doing enough?
Well, some are doing as much as they can, but certainly it's never enough, I think. We always can do better. Civil society is more energized, but activity, I think, has been lacking. The legislature is an improvement from what we had under Njie, but they could have done more. There is no reason why the Public Order Act should not be repealed. There is no reason why the Electoral Amendment Act should not have been repealed. There is no reason why the Newspaper Act should not have been repealed. It's been 2.5 years now. What are they waiting for? So there has been a lack of focus, I think, and those of us who believe we could be doing better should muster our efforts and try and put the country on a different footing. It's just not acceptable for me, at least.
Last question. I know I did say that was the last question, but this is the last question. Given the opportunity, what would be your 3 most highest priority areas if you were president today?
Well, look, the president has moral authority and he has a bully pulpit, as we say in the US. I'm not sure Barrow even recognizes that. The president speaks. When the president speaks, the nation listens. He can change the tone of the conversation and try and change the culture of maslaha we have in this country, where we see things that are going wrong, but we don't say anything about it because we don't want to offend somebody. Well, it's better to offend somebody and get things right and not offend somebody and really have a terrible outcome in terms of the life of the people, which could go on for generations. So changing the tone and the tone of the conversation is one thing that the president could do. The machinery of government has to change. We have to infuse this with a certain degree of efficiency and an ethos of service to the country, rather than everything that's been looked at in the prism of, well, what can I get out of it? You know, you talk to government officials or people around the country, you hear the constant complaint about going into a government office. Nobody seems to be concerned. So there's a lack of discipline. We need transparency. What the government does matters. We need to be able to know how contracts are being awarded, to whom they're going. Is there a fair bidding process? This will generate confidence, I think, and help this country be on a better footing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Njie. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.